Tonight I am going to be reading America's White Table by Margot Chase Saylor. But before I read that, I'm going to explain the objects on this table and what they mean. A small table is placed at the front of the room to show one soldier's lonely battle against many. The table is covered with a white cloth to honor a soldier's pure heart when he answers his country's call to duty. An empty chair is pushed to the table for the missing soldiers who are not present. A lemon slice and grains of salt represent the tears of family members and to show a captive soldier's bitter fate, waiting for loved ones to return. A black napkin is laid for the sorrow of captivity and the emptiness left in the hearts of family members. The glass is turned over for those who cannot lift a toast and for the meal that will not be eaten. A white candle symbolizes peace. And finally, a red rose in a vase tied with a red ribbon for the hope that all our missing soldiers will return someday. It was just a little white table, but it brought tears of pride to my Uncle John's eyes. The Veterans Day he came for dinner and stood by it, set for one person, even though no one would be eating at it. It was just a little white table, but earlier that day, Mama had told Gretchen, Samantha, and I the little white table we were setting for Veterans Day was just like the one set all over America in the dining halls of the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and the Air Force since the Vietnam War ended. The tables honor the men and women who serve in America's armed forces, especially those missing in action, our MIAs and our prisoners of war, our POWs. It was just a little white table, but it felt as big as America when we helped Mama put each item on it, and she told us why it was so important. We use a small table, girls, she explained, to show one soldier's lonely battle against many. We cover it with a white cloth to honor a soldier's pure heart when he answers his country's call. We place a lemon slice and grains of salt on a plate to show a captive soldier's bitter fate and the tears of families waiting for loved ones to return. We push an empty chair to the table for the missing soldiers who are not here. We lay a black napkin for the sorrow of captivity and turn over for a glass for the meal that will not be eaten. We place a white candle for the peace, and finally a red rose in a vase tied with a red ribbon, symbolizing hope that all our missing soldiers will return home someday. Mama finished speaking just as sunlight spilled onto the table and filled the overturned glass. It was just a little white table, but it suddenly made me want to burst with a feeling I couldn't explain when Mama told us how much our setting the white table would mean to Uncle John that night. Then she told us something we didn't know. Our Uncle John, who gave us bear hugs and spun us around and called me his Katie girl, was a POW in Vietnam before we were born. It was just a little white table, but it gave us the courage to ask Mama what happened to Uncle John in Vietnam. She quietly told us his story. When Uncle John served in Vietnam, he was sent on a rescue mission, and his helicopter was shot down behind the enemy lines, she began. And he and his 3 crew members were taken prisoner. One crew member, named Mike, had serious wounds from the crash, but Uncle John and the other men tried to help Mike get better and persuaded a guard to bring Mike medicine. Then one day, when a guard looked away, Uncle John and the others had the chance to escape, but Mike was still too sick to go. So Uncle John stayed behind, because he wouldn't leave a fellow soldier alone so far from home. But how did Uncle John get free, we asked. Sometime later, Uncle John had the chance to escape again, and somehow he was able to take Mike with him, carrying him on his back and collecting just enough rainwater in the big leaves to keep them alive, until Uncle John found an American infantry unit to help them. But even though Uncle John did everything he could to bring Mike home alive, Mike's wounds were just too serious, and he died before the rescue helicopter landed. I know that Mike was only 20 years old, and he dreamed of playing football. But he loved America so much that he was willing to give up his life for our freedom. And I know how much Uncle John loves America too, but he learned when helping Mike that a soldier risks his life for a fellow soldier because the best of our country lives in every man and woman who lay down their life for you too. It was just a little white table, but it needed words of gratitude, like Mama's Thanksgiving meal. So before Uncle John arrived for dinner, Gretchen, Samantha, and I decided to put 3 gifts of our own on the table to honor our veterans. Gretchen colored pictures of all the objects on the table, and Samantha wrote out the words of "My country, 'tis of thee" as a tribute in song. But I didn't know what I, a 10-year-old girl, could ever put on the table that was as important as my freedom to me. It was just a little white table, but I looked at it all dinner long, and in the quiet inside me, I could almost hear the silent soldiers of the empty chairs saying, "Remember us, please. We are real people like your Uncle John and Mike, who left families and friends, hopes and dreams of our own to protect your birthright of liberty from disappearing as easily as sunlight from a glass." It was just a little white table, but it took my words away as I hugged Uncle John goodnight and wanted to thank him for serving our country so bravely. So I hugged him even harder and I told him I loved him. Uncle John hugged me back even harder than I had hugged him. And that's when I knew what I could put on the table. My promise to put the words from my heart into a little book about America's white table. And in the book, I'd use Gretchen's pictures and Samantha's song and Mama's story about Uncle John and his friend Mike. Because I hope that everyone who read it would set a white table on Veterans Day as well. So the brave Americans the little table honors won't ever feel forgotten by the country they love so much. Then in the salt, on the little white table, I traced in the grains of their families' tears what each man and woman who serves our country is to me, a hero. And that's when I saw tears of pride fill my Uncle John's eyes. Thank you.